Now, finally for this episode, I'm going to discuss the different categories of characters in the Commedia dell'Arte. First of all, there was the servant and the master. And this character is called Zani. He was one of the earliest Commedia dell'Arte characters. Now, when Commedia dell'Arte started, the region of Bergamo was owned by Venice. They'd taken it over. And so Venice's trading partners had flooded the market in Bergamo with cheap imported goods, basically. So locals couldn't ply their wares. And so they went to Venice in search for work, and they became the Zani, the comic servants. A version of the name Gianni or John. So basically, Zanis are Johns. And they were new in town and naive and trying to do what they could to survive. The other major character to begin with was the Magnifico, the ruler of the town, the most important, wealthy, influential man in the town. And originally he was unmasked, while the Zani wore this style of mask. Eventually, the Magnifico split into a category of characters called the Vecchi, or the old people, or the masters, the people with power. And they included the Venetian merchant, Pantalone, and who was very stingy and greedy, and the know-it-all doctor, Il Dottore, from the university town of Bergamo. And there were many other Vecchi as well that developed over time. Zani split into various characters as well, and they were called the Zani, the comic servants. And there were the first Zani, who were the smarter characters who drove the plot and had the plan, and these included characters like the scheming Brigella and Scaramouche, who was always ready for a fight. And then there was the second Zani, who was naive and was more interested in immediate gratification. And they were characters like Arlecchino, the somewhat witty fool, or the somewhat clever fool, who had just enough wits about him to get by. And also Pulcinella, who was always on the make. And so they, for many years, were the main characters of the Commedia dell'Arte. Now, of course, where were the women? Originally, there were no women on stage. And so the only female character was a character called Zanna, who was a female Zani, who was played by a man and wore a mask that was grotesque, like her male counterparts. Eventually, there was a character called Cantana, who was basically a song and dance character who appeared between the acts. And eventually Fantesca, who was played by a woman. Cantana was played by a woman, of course. And then Fantesca was the first female character to interact with the plot, and she was a dim-witted female servant. Fantesca and Zania coexisted, but were both eclipsed eventually when the character of the servetta, or the witty female servant, came along. And she was originally Francescina, who was worldly and a bit promiscuous, but eventually she developed into characters like Colombina, who really had their wits about them and were at the very centre of the plot. It's interesting to know that in the Renaissance there was this character who ran the show. She was fending off the advances of the old men, fending off the advances of the male Zani, manipulating them to do what they want, manipulating the lover characters to come together because they couldn't do it on their own. So the smartest character in the story, the sanest person on the island, was in fact a young working class woman. Now, opening up the stage to women allowed for the introduction of the next major category of characters, and as I just mentioned, they were the lovers, the innamorati they were called, and they were in love with their lover, but they were in love with being in love, and they were in love with themselves. They were in love with the drama of it all. And they were the third major category of characters. There were a range of characters who didn't quite fit into any of those categories. They were outsiders, but could also be versatile in many cases and could be put into one of those categories as the plot needed. The best known of these is Il Capitano, the boastful but secretly cowardly foreign soldier. If he ever was a soldier or a captain, he may have just been saying so. So that sort of rounds out the main cast of the Commedia dell'Arte, although there were actually hundreds and hundreds of characters, because the characters split off in different directions. Characters like Brighella were popular, and so other people performed them and put their own spin on it, and they became other characters. There was Mezzatino, another version of Brighella. Arlecchino had another version called Truffaldino. There was another Pantalone-like character called Cassandro. There are various kinds of Pulcinellas and doctors and captains. The Zani character of Scaramuccia himself is spun off from the captain. So there was a never-ending list of, seemingly never-ending list of Commedia dell'Arte characters. And in the next episode, I'm going to start introducing the characters more specifically and perhaps giving a little demonstration. Thank you.